The summons arrived before dawn, sealed with the ministry's wax and a single sentence that could fit on the edge of a quill box. Field assessment begins at first light. Report to the northern gate. Bring nothing you cannot afford to lose. Hermione read it twice, then folded it into her cloak. The castle hadn't yet woken. Even the portraits muttered in their sleep. She looked out over the black lake, still as oil, and thought about the hearings, the word want echoing through the great hall like a stray spell that refused to die. By the time she reached the gate, the horizon was grey with the promise of rain. Draco was already there, gloved hands in his pockets, hair damp with mist. Ron leaned against the wall beside him, half alert, half irritated. The silence between the three of them stretched, a web strung over an old wound. "Early risers," Draco said. The words were light, but the tone was not. "Habit," Hermione replied. Ron adjusted the strap of his satchel. "Let's just get this done." An aura from the ministry, stern, anonymous, and very bored, gave them their briefing. The reconciliation oath pairs were being tested in practical field conditions. Their task, retrieve a relic lost during the war, rumoured to lie somewhere deep in the Forbidden Forest. The relic, a small obsidian disc marked with runes of confession, was once used to extract truth from captured Death Eaters. Now it was missing and dangerous. "The charm field around it reacts to deception," the aura warned. "Perfect for you two." His smile was not kind. Hermione wanted to argue the ethics of sending bonded partners into cursed woods to fetch a truth relic, but the oath pulsed once, a reminder that resistance and resentment tasted the same. She swallowed her protest. They stepped into the forest as the sun broke. The first light caught in the fog, turning it to molten glass. Every sound, leaves dripping, boots on soil, breath, felt amplified. The oath stretched like a wire between them, alert, curious, humming softly as if it recognized this place. Hermione took the lead, wand raised. Draco followed close enough that she could feel the rhythm of his steps. Ron stayed a few paces behind, protective but not intrusive. For a while, only the forest spoke. Hours passed, punctuated by spells for direction and safety. The path wound through thickets and moss-covered stones where old wards still sparked faintly underfoot. At one point, Hermione brushed her hand against a tree scarred by lightning. The oath flared warm in response. Draco noticed. "It likes this place," he said. "Or it remembers it," she murmured. He glanced around. Plenty of ghosts to remember. When they reached a clearing, the air changed, charged, metallic. The trees grew sparse, roots blackened by a lingering curse. Hermione knelt and traced a circle in the dirt. Residual energy, the relic's near. Ron's wand was already out. So are the things guarding it. They didn't have to wait long. A shimmer rippled through the clearing, and 3 shadow forms emerged, faded remnants of old dark magic, flickering like smoke caught in glass. Hermione felt the oath surge, its instinct to protect confusing itself with aggression. "Don't fight them," she said quickly. "They're reflections of guilt. They feed on truth left unspoken." Draco laughed once without humour. "Then they'll love me." He stepped forward, wand steady. "Finite obscura." The shadow trembled, then lunged. Hermione reacted before thought, her spell crossing his, gold over silver. The burst of light shattered the first apparition. The second screamed silently and vanished. The third didn't attack. It hovered between them, coiling like smoke. Then it spoke, not aloud, but through the bond. A voice that was both theirs and not theirs. "Which of you carries the heavier lie?" Hermione froze. The oath quivered, hungry for the answer. Draco's expression didn't change, but she felt the spike of fear behind his calm. "Ignore it," he said. They moved forward together, but the forest wasn't finished. A gust of cold air swept through the clearing, extinguishing light. The relic's energy pulsed beneath their feet, a heartbeat beneath the soil. Then abruptly Hermione's vision blurred. The oath yanked hard, a command she couldn't refuse. She saw flashes not her own, a wand trembling in pale fingers, screams echoing off marble floors, a mother's voice saying, "Run!" Draco's memory. The night he refused to identify her at Malfoy Manor, the moment he saved her life by pretending he didn't recognize her. The vision broke. She staggered. Draco caught her by the arm, steadying her. "You saw," he said quietly. "I saw." Ron looked between them, confused. "What did you—" "Not now," Draco cut in. The relic shimmered to life at the centre of the clearing, half buried in roots. Hermione knelt to free it. The disc pulsed faintly, each rune glowing as her fingers brushed it. "It's resonating with the oath," she whispered. The runes brightened. The oath flared to match. A hum filled the air, deep and rhythmic. Then came the voice again, no longer external but inside their shared pulse. "One of you lies still." Hermione looked up sharply. Draco's face had gone pale. The oath's magic coiled tighter around them, reacting to the unspoken. "What lie?" she demanded. Draco shook his head. "It's not the time," the relic disagreed. A burst of light tore through the clearing, throwing Ron backward. Hermione shielded her eyes as the oath forced its demand. Truth. The pressure was unbearable, every hidden thought dragged toward the surface. Hermione's mind raced through everything unspoken, her fear, her longing, her confusion. But it wasn't hers the relic wanted. It pulsed toward Draco. He sank to his knees. "Stop! Draco!" Hermione dropped beside him, gripping his shoulders. "What is it hiding?" His voice broke. "The oath. It didn't choose us by chance. They told me before it started." She froze. "What?" He met her eyes. "The ministry said pairing me with you was punishment. That binding me to someone incorruptible would burn out the parts of me they didn't trust." Hermione's breath caught. The forest blurred. "You knew?" "Yes." His voice cracked under the weight of it. "I let it happen. I thought if it worked, I'd earn my way back." The relic's glow dimmed, satisfied. The oath's tension eased. But Hermione couldn't move. The betrayal cut too cleanly to bleed. Ron picked himself up, brushing leaves off his cloak. "So that's the secret," he said grimly. "You volunteered to make her your conscience." Draco stood, unsteady. "It wasn't supposed to hurt her." Hermione's voice was ice. "Everything about this hurts." The oath pulsed once, faintly, regret, apology, exhaustion, and went still. Above them, thunder cracked. The relic's light faded completely, leaving only the smell of ozone and damp soil. The assessment was over. They began the silent walk back. The path was the same, but nothing else was. When they reached the edge of the forest, the ministry aura was waiting, clipboard in hand. "Recovered the relic?" Hermione handed it over. Her voice didn't waver. "Yes, it's intact." The aura nodded, unimpressed. "Excellent. Your performance will be evaluated." Ron started to reply, but Hermione kept walking. Draco followed a few paces behind, silent. The castle loomed ahead, grey against grey. The oath lay dormant between them, a bridge too heavy to cross. That night, Hermione sat by the fire in the common room, staring at her reflection in the window. The rain made rivers of the glass, bending her face into shapes she didn't recognise. The oath pulsed once, soft, uncertain, as if asking permission to speak. She didn't answer. Some truths, she thought, are too raw to heal in daylight. Morning arrived colourless. The forest mud still clung to their boots when the summons came again, an evaluation debrief in McGonagall's office. Hermione had slept hardly at all. Every time she closed her eyes, the relic's voice whispered, "One of you lies still." Draco waited outside the office door, the corridor bright with charmed daylight. His hair looked almost white against the dark of his cloak. He didn't speak until she did. "You told them I was your penance," Hermione said quietly. "I told them what they already believed," he answered. They needed a villain who was cooperating. "And a saint to redeem him," she said. He didn't deny it. The oath, dulled since the forest, gave a faint flicker, hurt without accusation. Inside, the headmistress sat behind her desk, the ministry auditors flanking her like parentheses. "You retrieved the relic," McGonagall began, "and survived its defence. That is not nothing." Hermione nodded once. Draco said nothing. Ketch consulted his parchment. There was interference, emotional instability in the oath during operation. Because truth was forced, Hermione said. Marrow's quill paused. We will determine whether the instability was a flaw or a feature. That was all. They were dismissed with the kind of politeness used for dangerous artifacts. In the hallway, Hermione exhaled shakily. They'll twist it however suits them. They always do, Draco said. The difference is now I'm the rope they twist it with. She wanted to say something cruel and true but couldn't find the cruelty. Instead she said, Don't speak to me for a while. He inclined his head, accepting sentence. The week unfolded in murmurs. Word of Draco's confession spread like ash through parchment, half truth, half invention. He used her. He was ordered to. He volunteered. Each version found an audience. The castle's noise became an organism fed on scandal. Hermione moved through it like a ghost. The oath pulsed faintly, sometimes reaching for him, sometimes retreating. Its magic had lost weight, as if embarrassed. At dinner, she sat with Ginny, who didn't ask questions. Across the hall, Draco ate with no one. Every so often she felt his gaze. The bond whispered awareness, but not comfort. Ron cornered her outside the library one evening. You don't have to keep defending him. I'm not defending him, she said. I'm defining myself, he frowned. By forgiving him. By understanding him, she said, and deciding that understanding isn't the same as absolution. Ron looked tired. Just don't let pity turn into something else. She almost laughed. Ron, that ship sailed months ago. He blinked. You're admitting it. I'm acknowledging it. She left before he could answer. 2 nights later, Vector summoned them both, separately, or so they thought. Hermione arrived first. The classroom was lit only by the glow of the oath sigil etched on the floor. It pulsed weakly like a dying ember. Vector looked concerned. The bond is destabilizing. The relic's surge damaged its symmetry. Hermione folded her arms. Meaning? If it continues, the link will collapse. Severance could injure you both. The door opened. Draco entered. His presence made the sigil brighten briefly, then sputter. Vector sighed. It reacts to your proximity and your distance alike. Fascinating and catastrophic. Hermione said, Is there a way to stabilize it? Possibly, Vector said. Resynchronization through mutual admission. Draco's mouth tightened. You mean confession. I mean balance, Vector said. You each hold unexpressed truths. The oath interprets silence as fracture. Hermione's voice was steady. And if we refuse? Then the magic will decide on its own which of you it belongs to, Vector said. It rarely ends kindly. She dismissed them with instructions to attempt small honesty daily. Outside, rain began again, sharp and thin. They walked in silence until Hermione stopped. What haven't you told me? Many things, he said. Pick one. The one that keeps the oath awake at night. He hesitated. That I wanted it to fail at first. Because if it failed, I could blame magic instead of myself. She nodded slowly. That's honest. He looked at her. Your turn, she swallowed. That I sometimes wish it would fail now. Because then I could stop wondering if what I feel is real or enchanted. The oath responded with a low, warm thrum, approval. A tiny spark lit between them and faded. Progress, Draco said softly. Maybe, she said. Or farewell. They didn't speak for 3 days. The oath dimmed to a faint heartbeat, alive, but quiet enough that she could almost forget it existed. Then on the 4th night it snapped awake. Hermione was in the library, surrounded by towers of parchment, trying to drown the whisper of rumour in work. The ink blurred on the page. Suddenly the pulse in her wrist flared, white-hot. The quill dropped from her hand. Pain lanced through her chest, panic not her own. She stood so quickly the chair fell. Draco. The oath tugged hard, pulling her toward the door, through hallways that blurred into streaks of torchlight. She followed the magic like a thread, breathless, until she burst into the eastern courtyard. Draco was there, slumped against the fountain, wand discarded. His skin was ashen, eyes unfocused. The bond shimmered violently between them, unstable light bending the rain around them. "What happened?" she gasped, kneeling. He laughed weakly. "The oath decided to measure loyalty. By nearly killing you? By making me remember," he said, voice breaking. "Everything I tried not to." She gripped his shoulders. "Tell me what it wants. Balance," he whispered. "It's unbinding itself because it thinks I still owe you a truth." "Then tell it," she said, shaking him. "Tell me," he swallowed hard. "The day of the trial, when I said I didn't love you." The oath flared. Rain hissed where it touched the light. "I lied," he said. "I lied because saying it under Veritaserum would have destroyed us both." Hermione froze. The bond's glow turned gold-white, a sound like wind through glass filling the air. "I meant it," he said simply. "And it terrified me, still does." The oath released its hold in a single wave of light. The rain fell normally again. Draco sagged forward, catching himself on his hands. The sigil on his wrist dimmed, steady now. Hermione's voice came out a whisper. "You risked the oath collapsing just to keep that to yourself?" He looked up, rain running down his face. "Better it collapse than make you a spectacle." For a long moment, the only sound was water. Then Hermione reached out, fingers brushing the edge of his sleeve. The bond shimmered faintly, gentler now, like something breathing in its sleep. "You're a fool," she said. "I know." She stood, hand lingering a second longer than necessary. "Come on, before someone sees." They walked back toward the castle in silence. The oath hummed between them, no longer demanding, only existing, a quiet acknowledgement of what had been spoken at last. But peace at Hogwarts was always temporary. By morning the story had spread. Malfoy collapsed, the oath is failing, Granger was seen saving him. The Ministry issued a new directive, mandatory evaluation of all surviving pairs. Vector's eyes were grim when she delivered the notice. "They think emotional attachment destabilizes the spell," she said. "They're calling it contamination." Hermione read the parchment and felt the air go cold. "They're going to separate us." Draco stood by the window, expression unreadable. "Then we won't have to lie about anything ever again." "That's not funny," she said. "It wasn't a joke." He turned to face her. "You've seen what happens when they interfere. If they try to sever the bond the wrong way, we could die," she finished. The oath pulsed sharply as if agreeing. Vector nodded. "You'll report to the Ministry in 3 days. Until then, stay close enough that the link remains stable." When she left, the silence between them thickened until it felt structural. Hermione stared at the floor. "So that's it? They erase it and we pretend none of this mattered?" Draco's reply was quiet. "If it keeps you alive, yes." She looked at him, searching for anger and finding only exhaustion. "That's not your choice anymore." He met her gaze evenly. "It never was." The oath flared between them, a brief golden thread, and then faded again, as if storing energy for whatever was coming. That night Hermione couldn't sleep. She walked to the astronomy tower, where the view stretched all the way to the Forbidden Forest. The storm had finally broken, leaving the air clean and cold. She leaned on the railing and let the wind tear through her thoughts. She felt him arrive before she heard him. The oath stirred, then settled, acknowledging his presence like a heartbeat sinking to another. "I thought you'd be asleep," Draco said. "So did I." They stood side by side, the wind moving their robes like waves. "Do you regret it?" she asked after a long silence. "The oath, us," he exhaled slowly. "No, but I regret every version of the world that made it necessary." She turned to him, eyes bright with unshed questions. "Then what happens after they separate us?" He smiled faintly. "You'll finally be free." Hermione shook her head. "Freedom doesn't feel like this." Lightning flickered far away, illuminating the edge of the forest where everything had started. The oath glowed once, a dim reflection of that light. He looked at her hand resting on the railing. then at the scar of the oath faintly visible on her wrist. "It's weakening," he said softly. "I can feel it pulling apart." "Then we hold it together," she said. "How?" "By not letting go." For the first time he laughed, a quiet, disbelieving sound. "You always make it sound so simple." "It isn't," she said. "But it's what we have." They stood there until the stars turned grey and the first hint of dawn blurred the horizon. The oath flickered gently between them, as though uncertain whether to fade or to fight. In the great hall the next morning, the ministry owl arrived with another sealed letter. Hermione broke the wax with trembling fingers. The message was brief. All pairs will undergo final separation on Saturday. Non-compliance will result in disciplinary action. She passed it silently to Draco. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Ron watched from across the table, worry etched deep. "You're going through with it?" Hermione nodded once. "We don't have a choice." "You always have a choice," Ron said. She looked down at her hands. "Not this time." When she looked up, Draco was already leaving the hall, his cloak trailing like smoke. The oath pulsed faintly, as if tugging after him, reluctant to let go. For the rest of the day, Hogwarts seemed to hold its breath. The sky turned the colour of pewter. Even the portraits stayed silent, as if aware that something was ending. Hermione spent the evening sorting through her notes, trying to pretend they were just equations again. But when she touched the page that still bore their joint entries, the line that read, "We do not hate each other," the ink shimmered faintly and bled into new shapes. A message written by the oath itself, not finished. She stared at it, heart hammering. Somewhere across the castle, Draco felt the same pulse under his skin and smiled without meaning to. The oath, though fractured, had decided to live. The notice came at dawn. Report to the Great Hall at 10. "Bring your wands." "Leave everything else." Hermione read the line until the letters blurred. The parchment smelled of metal and bureaucracy. Even the ink looked cold. Outside, rain tapped the windows in restless arithmetic. She dressed without thinking, each motion rehearsed. Downstairs, the corridors were hushed. Students whispering around corners, portraits pretending not to watch. The castle itself felt braced, as if it understood what severance really meant. Draco waited by the entrance hall doors. His uniform was immaculate, but there were shadows beneath his eyes. The oath pulsed between them, faint but steady, like a reluctant heartbeat. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "They'll unmake it," he murmured. "Everything." She met his gaze. "Not everything." Ron appeared then, cloak damp from the morning. "They said I could stay in case something goes wrong." He didn't elaborate. None of them had slept. The Great Hall looked wrong. The long tables were gone, the floor gleamed like wet marble. At the centre, a circle of runes glowed a dull red. Around it, ministry officials murmured, quills floating like nervous birds. McGonagall stood apart, arms crossed, expression carved in granite. Inspector Ketch adjusted his spectacles. "You will stand within the circle. When instructed, release your wands." Draco gave a humourless smile. "And if the oath objects?" Marrow answered flatly, "It won't." They stepped into the circle. The moment their feet crossed the line, the air changed, thickened, alive. The sigil on their wrists brightened. Hermione felt the oath stretch awake, confused and defensive. Marrow began the incantation. The runes flared from red to white. Light poured upward like water rising in reverse, forming a sphere around them. "Subject bonds acknowledged," Marrow said. "Commencing dissolution." The first pulse hit like a shockwave. Hermione staggered. Draco caught her elbow. The oath retaliated instinctively, a shimmer of gold racing through the barrier, slamming against the runes. Sparks burst across the floor. "Hold it steady," Marrow barked. But the oath wasn't cooperating. It flared again, wild now, pulling on every shared memory. Hermione saw flashes, the library, the duel, the forest, the look on his face when he'd said I lied. She clutched her head, gasping. Draco's hand found hers. "Focus," he said. Anchor it, door and library. She tried, but the incantation's rhythm drowned her words. The oath screamed, a sound made of light, and the runes cracked. McGonagall's voice cut through the chaos. Stop the ritual! Too late. The magic imploded, dragging them both inward. The hall vanished. They landed in a room that wasn't a room. A corridor of light with doors on either side, each door carved from memory. The floor looked like water that had decided to be glass. Far away, the echo of the Great Hall's chant thinned to a rumour. Close by, the oath took a shape, silver thread suspended in air, tugging gently at both their wrists. Return tunnel, Hermione said, breath fogging in a place that had no temperature. Vector described it. Contact, descent, return, compressed into one. Draco glanced at the doors. One was labelled by the scent of hot wax and marble, another by rain and repaired stone, a third by a word he refused to read. They mean to force us through until nothing sticks. Then we choose, she said, lifting her chin. Or it will. The first door opened without touch. Malfoy Manor, but not the moment of torture, rather the hallway after, where the silence felt like a punishment for surviving. Hermione moved forward and the scene tried to claim her pulse. The oath tugged, feed me grief, and she refused, breathing library lamp calm into the air. The room dissolved into dust. Second door, the courtyard duel. The ricochet. His arm braced under her back so bone met muscle, not stone. His breath too close. The crowd's appetite. She held that image steady until the oath quieted, as if acknowledging, yes, this is also true. The door swung shut. Third door, the forest clearing and the relic's accusation. One of you lies still. The words breathed like a living thing. Draco reached for the handle to lock it again. Hermione stopped him. We don't bury this. They let the door stand open long enough to feel the shame become a shape they could carry, then closed it together. The thread between their wrists brightened. The corridor curved. Another door waited, stormlight behind it, a rail, stars like pins. The tower where he had said no to love and yes to wanting. It opened on its own and showed them how they had stood side by side, each refusing to lean. This time the memory added what neither had admitted. The urge to reach for a sleeve and the deliberate decision not to. The oath hummed, almost satisfied. What do we offer it? Draco asked. Not performance. Hermione swallowed. A decision. They turned. At the corridor's far end, a last door appeared, plain walnut, oiled, cool. His door. Beside it, a reading lamp pulled gold across a desk. Her library. The spaces overlapped until they formed a new room where both could breathe. Return, she said. Return, he echoed. The oath tightened, testing. Something from outside, Marrow's voice, pushed like wind through a crack. Dissolution Phase 2. Runes flared ghostly along the corridor walls, seeking purchase. Hermione took Draco's hand. The simple contact transformed the tunnel. Light steadied, the floor held. Listen, she said into the air, to the spell that governed, to the ministry, to the oath. We are not refusing separation, we are choosing the terms. You think it can tell the difference? Draco asked. It's built on difference, she said. On precision, the corridor shook. Doors rattled. Lines of script skittered like silver insects across the glass floor. Unbind, unbind, unbind. Now, Hermione whispered. What we won't lie about. Draco's throat worked. I will not call what I feel a side effect. I will not call it a mistake, she said. The oath flared, hot, bright, clean. The doors burst outward and then folded like cards into the thread itself, memory condensed into a single line of true things. The corridor dimmed to quiet. The far wall parted. Through the gap, the great hall reassembled. Banners, officials, the runic circle coughing sparks. They stood once more inside it. The sphere of light shivered, struggling between orders. Sever the link, Ketch shouted. Now! Marrow's wand carved the final arc. The dissolution charm descended like a blade of winter. Anchors, Hermione said fast and soft. Door and library. They didn't touch. The sphere forbade it. They looked and said the names together, and the oath compressed, a filament drawn through a ring and tied off, not broken, merely taught how to be smaller without lying. The blade hit. Light cracked. A sound like a bell breaking rang up into the rafters and down into bone. The sigils on their wrists burned and went dark, then pulsed once, then steadied at a faint glow. Silence. The sphere failed. Officials lowered their wands. Quills hovered, uncertain how to name what had happened. Hermione swayed and caught herself. The world felt too loud, as if the volume control had snapped. She turned carefully to Draco. He was on his knees. "Draco!" Her voice came out wrong. She dropped beside him. His eyes were open but unfocused, pupils wide, face drained of colour. She touched his wrist. A flutter. Then nothing she could trust. "Pumphrey!" McGonagall's command split the hush. The matron was already moving, conjuring a stretcher with the practical ferocity of someone who despised drama, except when it saved lives. Hermione caught his hand. The sigil at his pulse flickered like a moth behind glass. "Stay," she said, not caring who heard. "Return." For a moment something answered. Heat under skin, the faintest tightening of his fingers. Then the answer slid away, as if the road were there but the traveller had paused at a bend. "Miss Granger," Pumphrey said gently but with steel. "Let go, dear." "I can't," Hermione said. "If I do, you'll follow him," Pumphrey said. "And I can carry only one." Hands, human, careful, lifted Draco. The crowd parted. Hermione rose, moving with them because her feet had learned to go where his did. Through the blur she saw Ron's face, white and set, saw Vector's mouth shaping return protocol, saw the auditors conferring too quickly to count as thought. At the infirmary door, Pumphrey stopped Hermione with a palm that smelled of antiseptic and lilac. "You wait. If the bond fails—" "It hasn't failed," Pumphrey said. "It's fighting, let it," the door shut. The corridor beyond yawned like a thrown net of silence. Hermione leaned against the cool wall and pressed her knuckles to her mouth until she tasted copper. The sigil on her wrist glowed faintly, every few heartbeats, like a lighthouse far away. Ron arrived breathless and didn't pretend to know what to say. He stood beside her, not touching, a warmth at the edge of weather. "I'm here," he said simply. "I know," they waited. The castle waited with them, the portraits didn't dare comment. Somewhere, the rain found the windows again and spoke in soft code. Vector came at last, sleeves pushed up, chalk on her fingers. "He's between." The oath compressed itself at the last moment to survive the severance. He followed it into the seam. "Is he in pain? No? Is he—" The word refused. Hermione tried another. "Can we pull him back?" Vector's eyes were kind in the way of people who do not lie to students they respect. "Perhaps. But not by force. The bond is terrarium small now. It accepts only what is true and necessary." Hermione nodded once as if to say, "I have practice." "Go in," Pumphrey called softly from inside. "One at a time." Hermione crossed the threshold. The ward lights were low. Draco lay very still, the lines of his face too perfect, as if sleep had sculpted him into someone less complicated. The sigil at his wrist glowed, dim, bright, dim, like a breathing lesson. She sat. She did not touch him. The oath would turn touch into a command. She folded her hands and spoke to the air between them. "You told the truth when it mattered less," she said. "Now tell the truth that matters most." No response. She tried another door. "I do not forgive the ministry for using me as a solution to you," she said. "And I do not forgive you for letting them. But forgiving is not the only way to love someone." The sigil brightened, then faded. She breathed and turned the word over, love like a coin she had been afraid to spend. "I am not here to rescue you," she said. "I am here to return with you." That's the difference the oath taught me. Come back because it's our work. Not because I begged. A minute. 2. The room held its breath. Then his fingers twitched, the smallest answer a body can make and still be counted as speech. The sigil steadied to a thin, constant glow. "Hear that?" Pumphrey whispered from the doorway, relief making her brisk. Pathway's opening, Hermione exhaled. Good, I'm tired of corridors. She stood, every joint admitting what the day had cost, and backed away to leave the space available to the living. At the door she paused and looked at him, as if there would be a test later on what his face had said, when he was almost not here. Return, she said one last time, very quietly, as if teaching a word to an animal who loved her enough to learn it. The ward lights flickered. The sigil brightened, and went out. The silence that followed was the sort that must be named to be survived. Hermione moved without knowing how she moved, and reached him, hand to wrist, cheek to lips, any proof. Nothing. Not absence, exactly. The wrong kind of stillness. Pumphrey was there suddenly, wand a metronome of urgent skill. Vector's voice counted charms. McGonagall arrived without footsteps, grief hidden in posture. Ron's prayer was not to any god Hermione recognised. The oath thread, invisible and stubborn, lay coiled against her skin like a line cut too close to the knot. Hermione, Pumphrey said, voice both blade and balm. Step back. She did, because discipline is what you do when love refuses to be useful. She stepped back and let the professionals work and made herself a promise that felt like an oath, even if no magic heard it. If the ministry had severed the bond by mathematics, she would answer by mathematics. Anchors, counts, returns, the exactness that had kept them from drowning. She would go to the place where he had paused, and she would stand there until pausing became moving again. Behind the curtain the spells slowed. Pumphrey's wand lowered. Vector's hands fell to her sides. McGonagall looked at the ceiling as if refusing to address anything less formidable. Ron put a hand on Hermione's shoulder. It was the gentlest thing he had done all year. The curtain did not move. The ward did not speak. Between two heartbeats large enough to be ours, the castle listened to itself and did not decide. Then somewhere, metal against stone, boot on stair, a portrait clearing its throat, the world resumed. The oath thread on Hermione's wrist warmed. The curtain remained closed. Night learned the shape of the infirmary and kept it. Lamps burned low behind curtains, giving each bed its own small moon. The scent was antiseptic and something kinder, lilac from Pumphrey's sleeves. The castle, so fond of spectacle by day, became very practical after midnight. It watched and waited and did not make noise it couldn't use. Hermione sat in the chair beside Draco's bed with the posture of a person holding a promise. The oath sigil at her wrist had cooled to a ghost, no brighter than the memory of heat, yet every so often it warmed, as if a hand passed close without touching. She timed her breath to those pulses, not trusting clocks. Clocks measured rooms, the bond measured people. Pumphrey checked vitals and made notes in a stern hand. Vector came in quiet, left chalk on the edge of the windowsill like a breadcrumb for logic to follow back. McGonagall, who never wasted a visit, stood at the foot of the bed once, said nothing that required words, and departed with her mouth set against the ministry's handwriting. In the morning, rumour pressed its face to the glass and fogged it. He's gone. He's sleeping. He ran. He stayed. The castle permitted none of it through the ward door. The door knew how to be a door. Ron arrived before breakfast with ink on his fingers and a creased look that meant he had read until paper blurred into fabric. He held up a parchment stamped with a seal the colour of dull teeth. There's a clause, he said without preamble. Hidden 3 pages past sense, continuance by mutual anchor. Hermione took it. The words were precisely ministry, a mercy disguised as paperwork. In cases of catastrophic destabilisation at point of severance, paired subjects may attempt a single assisted return under supervision, provided the bond demonstrates residual integrity and both parties consent in writing or equivalent magical sign. In writing, she said, staring at Draco's unmoving hand. Or sign, Ron grimaced. They mean a pulse or a miracle. Or a word, Hermione said, not sure whether she had pulled that from logic or hope. Pumphrey glanced at the clause, nodded once, very slight, as if the universe had agreed to lend them 1 coin and expected it back with interest. You'll do nothing foolish, she said, meaning do exactly the necessary foolish thing and no more. Vector filled the doorway with a ledger pressed to her chest like a shield. Assisted return is possible, she said, but not by force. The oath as it exists now is terrarium small, folded to survive. If you enter, you do so by its rule: contact, dissent, return. No ornament. I understand, Hermione said. Do you? Vector's voice had no cruelty in it. Inside the fold you will have no room for heroic speeches. Honesty compresses in small spaces. So does grief. Hermione looked at Draco. The stillness of his face felt wrong only because she had learned it in motion. Anger taught to bow, humour that forgot itself and arrived late, attention like a hand extended across a desk and withdrawn on time. I understand, she repeated. McGonagall's signature clattered to parchment, clean and final. We proceed at twilight, she said. Magic remembers edges better than afternoons. While the day wore itself thin, Hermione tried to prepare. She failed in every way that looked like school, and succeeded in every way that looked like growing up. She drank water. She ate something unmemorable and finished it. She wrote a sentence she didn't show anyone and folded it into her pocket. She washed her hands and found that they shook only when she looked at them. By late afternoon, the sky had chosen a colour between blue and bruise. The ward lamps shadowed the floor like slow rivers. Vector chalked a small circle on the tile beside Draco's bed. No runes, no glory, only a measured ring, and the knowledge that a circle's strength was the same in palaces and kitchens. Sit, she told Hermione. Anchor statements only. If you feel the tunnel try to widen, narrow it. If it narrows too far, widen it. Remember the door. Remember the lamp. Hermione nodded. Ron stood just outside the privacy screen, a guard who knew he could keep out everything but the important thing. Pumphrey set vials within reach and then palmed them away again in case reach became desperation. McGonagall took a seat like a mountain takes weather. Hermione placed her palm against Draco's, lightly, as if setting a glass on old wood. Contact! The oath thread on her wrist warmed at once, surprised and then intent. Light did not blaze. It gathered, a quiet condensation around skin, and drew a line no thicker than a thought between them. Dissent, Hermione whispered. The ward dimmed without going dark. The chair, the curtain, the scent of lilac, the iron bedstead, everything stepped 2 inches back. A corridor of not floor and not air opened like a seam in a well-made dress. She felt for the tunnel's grain the way she felt for threads in paper, long practice that looked like caution, and was actually skill. Then she went in. The return tunnel did not make a spectacle this time. It built itself like good writing, clean and specific. No gallery of doors. No crash of remembered thunder. A strip of walkable light ran forward until it softened into grey. The oath's thread hung just ahead, faint as breath on glass. Hermione followed, relieved to find she did not need to run. Running wastes air. At the first bend, the tunnel tested her with small, efficient cruelties, the sound of her own voice calling his name in the great hall when he didn't answer. The echo of Ron's prayer, which had contained love and resentment both, the way her fingers had memorized the shape of his sleeve without permission. She answered with anchors gentle and precise. Lamp. Door. Library dust that meant peace, not neglect. Walnut cool beneath palm. The tunnel accepted her honesty and did not add fees. Halfway in, the light thinned until she felt rather than saw the path. A weight like unread words pressed between her ribs. She thought she knew the memory that would stand in the road. She was wrong. A room formed not from her war, but from his boyhood. She recognised it only because she had learned the family history by the way spells sounded when his mouth made them. A study at Malfoy Manor, but before the floors had learned the names of cruelty. Shelves too perfect. Decanters. An expensive clock that refused to tick loudly in front of company. At the desk, a boy with fair hair, not yet instructed into sharpness, sat with a book open, and his face arranged in concentration that was almost pretend. Beside him, his mother moved like someone protecting something with grace. At the doorway, a shadow that would later have a name, watched with the impatience of men who mistake love for inventory. The scene didn't ask Hermione to fix it. That was not the test. It asked her to name what she saw and what it made in her. Care, she said softly to the moving figure. And apprenticeship, to the boy. And hunger, to the doorway. The oath quivered, pleased with the nouns, and let the room fold away. Precision saves time. She was allowed to keep moving. The tunnel narrowed. At the end of the new stretch, a darkness waited the colour of unstarted sentences. A simple door stood there, plain walnut, and would not open. She was not surprised. I know you, she said, resting her forehead lightly against its cool. When you don't decide, the world decides for you and calls it fate. The door didn't answer. Doors are not obliged to speak. She was the one who had to. Here is my anchor, she said. And my admission. I can walk back without you. I don't want to. The latch warmed. Metal remembers hands. I'm not here to drag you, she said. I'm here to make standing feel like standing, not punishment. A hinge clicked as if considering. The tunnel behind her tugged gently. Pumphrey's caution, Vector's rule, Ron's mortal patience. How long can a person be absent and still be called here? She ignored the clock that had decided to start up in her head and told the door the one thing the oath could not accuse her of performing. I loved you, she said, past tense only because grammar needed a tool. I love you, not as absolution, as fact. The walnut warmed to body temperature. The door opened inward to a small square of quiet, with a desk lamp already lit. He sat there, elbows on knees, palms dangling, as if he had been caught practicing how to not be caught practicing anything. The tunnel bent the world around him into clarity, not the man whose posture in a hearing meant defiance threaded with apology, not the boy on a tower making a choice too late to be named brave. Just Draco momentarily unedited. He didn't look up. This is the room I wait in when I have to tell the next truth. Hermione took a step across the threshold. What is it? He breathed, counting without numbers. That I am. The word broke like a cord taut too tight. Afraid, he managed. Of waking into a world where the bond is a rumour, and you are a corridor away, and I have to make choices without you to mark when I'm lying to myself. She sat on the floor opposite, because chairs are for conversation, and floors are for vows. Here is mine, she said. I'm afraid of waking into a world where I mistake relief for freedom, and walk away from the thing that made me honest. She let the sentence stand. It wore neither wedding nor funeral clothes. It didn't need them. Return with me, and if the bond remains a thread, we will learn thread work. He looked at her then, and the relief that crossed his face was not dramatic. It was human. He extended a hand in that idiotic, perfect way he had learned to use when neither of them could tolerate the melodrama of anything else. She took it. The tunnel approved, not with trumpets, but with the silence that happens after trueness settles into place. Contact, she said. Descent, he said, grinning despite himself at the wrong step, is done. Return, they said together, not loud. The world reattached itself with less violence than last time. Hospital light gathered out of the grey. The smell of lilac remembered its name. Hermione felt the chair under her again, the circle chalk rough under her shoe, the weight and miracle of a hand in hers that did not go away when she opened her eyes. Draco's fingers tightened. A small sound escaped his throat, a protest against air, then a welcome of it. His lashes flickered. Colour moved toward his mouth as if it had been kept outside by bouncers and had finally talked its way past. Pumphrey's hand materialised with a charm that counted heartbeats like a drum major. Vector whispered numbers that meant victory by inches. McGonagall's shoulders lowered the width of a word. He turned his head. Found her. An expression like being caught in a lie and glad of it crossed his face and settled into something he could keep. Hi, he said, voice wrecked and alive. Hi, she answered, because any other word would have poured too fast for the container. Ron made a sound behind the curtain that pretended not to be crying. The castle, which loved a scene but understood privacy, let the wind breathe against the shutters and kept the portraits asleep. Water, Pumphrey commanded, efficient joy making her stern. Hermione held the cup to Draco's mouth, and tried not to think about every time she had wanted to put a thing in his hands he refused to take. "Do you remember?" she asked when the business of body had been temporarily satisfied. "Enough," he said. "The door. The lamp. The word that pays the bill at the end of the day." He closed his eyes once, opened them again. "Return." The sigils at their wrists glowed, faint, steady, and then dimmed to a thread that lay warm against skin, not tugging, not electing itself sovereign. Survived, reduced, honest. Marrow and Ketch entered on permission and bureaucracy both. They took in the chalk, the stillness, the not-dead boy on the bed, and the woman who had looked at a ministry clause and made it useful. Quills rose like insects. McGonagall's look flayed them into discretion. "The programme continues under amended terms," Marrow said at last, eyes on the numbers Vector had written. "Forced severance is suspended indefinitely for bonded pairs with residual integrity." She glanced at Draco. Something like respect troubled the professional smoothness. "Signatures will follow." Ketch looked at the thread on Hermione's wrist, the kind that politicians could not easily legislate, and decided to be intelligent. "We will need your account," he said, remarkably gentle. "You'll get the record," Hermione said, already shaping joint lines in her head. We entered under clause. We returned by anchor. We did not lie to ourselves. The officials retreated with the good sense to call their exit necessary work. Ron came around the curtain and stared at Draco like one stares at a person found after having been lost long enough to require a new language. "You owe me 5 galleons," he said, and then hugged Hermione badly before he remembered he didn't know whether he was allowed. "Pay the man later," Pumphrey said, smiling at the floor because that was safer than at their faces. "Out, all of you, before I turn triumph into infection." They stepped into the corridor. It held them like hands. Hermione leaned back against the wall. Ron leaned beside her. Quiet made room for what still needed saying. "You went in alone," Ron said, not a question. "I didn't want to drag a second person where truth is charged by the syllable," she replied. He nodded. "You'll tell me the parts that belong to me." "I will," she said, and meant not now. He looked past her at the door. "Do you want this thread to remain?" She didn't look at her wrist. Looking pretends doubt is news. "Yes," she said. "At this size, at this honesty." Ron breathed out, long and something like free. "Okay." He paused, gathering a grin like a dropped quaffle. "I'm still going to dislike him on Tuesdays. That seems fair." They laughed then, softly, without debt. When Hermione went back inside, Draco was asleep in the right way. Not waiting. Resting. The oath warmed one more time as if to nudge a shoulder in passing, and then settled, content to be small and alive and out of the paper. She wrote the day's entry on the clipboard Vector left. We invoked the clause titled Continuance by Mutual Anchor. We re-entered the return tunnel under supervision. We crossed a room that belonged to him and refused to fix it, naming it instead. We offered 1 truth each that cost the correct amount. The thread remains. A door can be a promise kept without being a prison. She added a final line, not for auditors. Freedom, when it is real, arrives as accuracy. Outside, sunset tried on colours and settled on one the castle could agree to. The night staff took their stations. The portraits woke for gossip and were denied. The wind remembered its path. Hermione slept eventually, cheek on her sleeve, and dreamed of a library lamp that never burned out and a door that never stuck, no matter the weather. Just before dawn, when quiet is thinnest and truth travels faster, the thread at her wrist warmed, and far away in a place that was no longer very far, a voice said, not a shout, not a plea, only a word told to a friend because it's time to go home. Return. She smiled in sleep and did. Morning carried the quiet that follows a night that chose life. The infirmary windows were open a palm's width. The air smelled of damp stone and lilac. Draco slept the pragmatic sleep of a body that had bargained with the world and been granted a narrow clause. Hermione sat at the foot of his bed with a notebook, making neat columns of truths they could afford to spend. We can stand being seen. We cannot stand being performed. The bond is thread small by choice, not accident. Return is a verb before it is a miracle. Vector looked in once, left a folded slip that said "Eat first," and vanished like a rumour that refuses to work before tea. By noon the ministry knocked, as ministries do, at the exact moment no one wanted it. Auditor Marrow entered with rain on her shoulders, and a stack of formalities thinner than yesterday's. Inspector Ketch followed, the scent of ink and caution about him like a cologne. Behind them stood a younger official, coat perfectly regulation, eyes too intent for comfort. "We require a confirmatory field assessment," Marrow said, voice even, not unkind. "A final demonstration that the oath as amended functions. If successful, the board will ratify suspension of severance." Ketch consulted a form. "You'll retrieve a device designated Relic 2. Working name, Mercy Mirror. A pane of black glass that detects and punishes performative virtue. It reads intention. When a user does a good act to be seen, it bites." Ron, who had been leaning against the window mullion, straightened. "Bites? Metaphorically," Ketch said. "And when provoked, not metaphorically." Hermione folded her arms. "So you want us to prove we aren't using each other as theatre for mercy?" "Yes," Marrow said simply. "In the oldest clearing of the forest there is a ring of hagstone. The mirror anchored itself there after the war. It will test you. Pass cleanly and my recommendation stands." Draco's mouth tilted, humour past exhaustion. "And if we fail?" Ketch didn't meet his eyes. "Then the board revisits dissolution." Vector's look said what no one else would in front of parchment. Absolutely not again. "But law is a stage set, the scene must still be played." Hermione slid her notebook into her bag. "When?" she asked. "Dusk," Marrow replied. "Wards thinned just enough to permit entry, just thick enough to keep the forest from deciding its own terms." The younger official, who had not yet given his name, cleared his throat. "I'm Lucas Shard, board liaison. I'll observe from the perimeter." No interference. Ron shot him a glance that measured and weighed, then set him on a shelf labelled watch. "I'll escort," he told Marrow before she could assign him. "Someone needs to keep score who isn't keeping minutes." Marrow nodded, almost grateful. "Be precise," she said to Hermione and Draco both. "The mirror is old. It has no patience for grandstanding." The forest had learned them by now. It took their breath, counted it, returned it with woodland arithmetic. Evening pressed between the trees like ink into paper. Owls marked their path in tiny, astonished syllables. The oath's thread rested light against Hermione's wrist, neither tugging nor retreating, a line between 2 points that had agreed, for now, not to be endpoints. They reached the clearing at twilight proper, sky violet, wet leaves black, hawthorn woven into a ring. In the centre stood a shard of glass taller than a man, black enough to be a hole if the light were wrong. Runic frost veined its surface. Around it the ground had learned to heal, seedlings in the seams of old scorch, mushrooms making census. "Stay outside the stones," Ron murmured, reading the old caution in the geometry. Lucas Shard positioned himself just beyond the first hawthorn, quill hovering, eyes intent. Marrow and Ketch remained at the far edge like punctuation that refused to move inside the sentence. Hermione stepped forward until the first hagstone framed her left shoulder. The mirror rippled once, an absent-minded cat deciding whether to open one eye, and then stilled. Her reflection did not appear. The glass showed only a glimmer like breath in winter. "It wants an offering," she said softly. "Not of active motive." Draco stood beside her, hands empty, posture careful. "It will know the difference between not wanting to look cruel and wanting to be kind." The words came without bitterness. He sounded like a man translating for a dangerous host. Ron, on the perimeter, drew a line in soil with his boot. "You're about to be graded by a piece of judgment that doesn't care about politics." "Good," Hermione said, surprising herself. "I trust that more than politics." The oath warmed, pleased by the choice of noun. She took one step into the ring. The mirror woke without moving. The clearing's temperature did not change. The light did. Colours dialed down until the world existed in precise charcoal. Language switched to present perfect. Hermione felt intense spool in her throat the way thread draws through a needle. "Name what you are offering," said a voice like cold iron left out under stars. It did not come from the glass, it came from the fact of it. Unadorned truth, Hermione said. And refusal to be improved by witnesses. Demonstrate refusal, said the iron. Her mouth went dry. Every impulse she had learned as a public person, explain, strengthen, teach, stood up to perform. She set them down politely. I will not persuade you, she said to the air. I know what I mean. Silence. The mirror drank the sentence like water. A seam of frost retreated in a branch's worth of veins. It turned to Draco without turning. Name what you bring. He didn't look at Marrow or Luca or Ron. He looked at the glass as if it were an old creditor, and he was on schedule. No performance, he said. And a vow I will not spend to avoid the bill. The oath thread heated, warning and consent. Hermione felt the words arrive in him the way thunder arrives from a storm you have counted correctly. I will not use her, he said, to the mirror, but also to the long hallway of his life where uses had been taught like verbs. Not to be seen. Not to be forgiven. Not to be anything I can point to when asked for proof. The frost shrank again. A hairline crack appeared at the base of the mirror and then sealed. The clearing held its breath in the way old places do when you have named exactly the thing they had been waiting to hear. Ron exhaled very quietly. Luca's quill shook, steadied. The mirror's voice thinned to a filament. The thread between you, grow or keep. Choose for necessity, not spectacle. Hermione felt Draco's look without turning her head. The oath warmed at her wrist, eager, afraid, honest. Keeping it small had saved them in the severance. Growing it now could anger the board, or worse, invite the magic to overtake motive and turn love into math again. Necessity, she repeated under her breath. She thought of the ministry's clause like a door held with a string. Of the school like a city with gossip in its pipes. Of Draco waking into a morning that did not decide for him. Of Vector's chalk circle, the simplest defence, exact lines, exact terms. Small, she said. Small, Draco said at the same moment. The mirror stilled. One long filament of light rose inside the glass like a reed drawing breath. It bent toward them, touched the thread at Hermione's wrist, and cooled into memory. The oath did not swell or gleam. It approved by not intruding. Necessity accepted. Marrow's shoulders lowered. Ketch made a notation that sounded like relief argued into official ease. Payment recognised, said the iron. Prove mercy without audience, Hermione frowned. How? The answer arrived in the clearing as a person. From the far edge of the stones came a boy, Slytherin crest, 6th year, the fragile arrogance of someone who's learnt to hide by sneer. She knew him by sight and the faculty ledger, Corin Montague, not unkind, only afraid at the speed of cruelty. He paused at the hawthorn ring, eyes a little too bright. Behind him, carrying himself with the underfed dignity of new authority, stood Luca Shard. Ron took a step, but the mirror's voice skimmed his ankle like cold water, no interference. He stayed, jaw set. Luca's tone was bland. Mr. Montague has volunteered a confession to test the object. He said volunteered in the way a man says offered when he means provided by pressure. Hermione's stomach went airless. No. Consent was obtained, Luca said lightly. He will be relieved to have his conscience lightened. Montague looked at the glass as if it were a god who liked bargains. I sent the owl. His voice trembled. I sent the rumour to the prophet about the severance. I thought it would protect the school from them. A glance at Draco, quick and ashamed. From it, he amended, pointing at the thread. The mirror tasted his edit like vinegar. Hermione's anger arrived cleanly, which surprised her. She had expected the messy kind. You were used, she said. Not to him only, but to the geometry that had produced him at this precise moral angle. Luca's eyes flicked. He's proud to help. I am not, Montague said to the mirror, not to Luca. I thought I was. It was easier to feel important than to feel afraid. The frost withdrew in one more vein. The mirror turned their test like a lens. Demonstrate mercy without audience. It would punish performance. It would punish the category of act that looks like forgiveness and smells like theatre. Hermione stepped out of the ring before she could decide that stepping out was a speech. She reached into her robe and took out a peppermint she'd forgotten she carried. Vector's after-lesson kind, chalk sweet. She held it out to the boy. "Here," she said. No wisdom. No relief for the school. A sugar and salt gesture, the kind that keeps the nervous system from burning its own fuel. "Your mouth tastes like iron right now." Montague stared, then took it with a thank you so small it barely counted as sound. He put it between his molars like a person closing a door gently. Hermione turned to Luca. "No more volunteers." He smiled in the way clever men do when told no, and reached into his pocket like a magician who believes he is the only one who knows where the rabbit is. "The board will decide what constitutes adequate demonstration." Ron moved then. He crossed to Luca with the patience of a man who has learned to enter rooms he doesn't like and do work he despises well. "You leaked the severance order," he said quietly. "Not the boy." Luca blinked. "That's an allegation." "It's an equation," Ron replied, handing over a folded parchment that wore a faint ministry watermark. "The owl that went to the prophet was keyed to your flu. You used Montague's account." "If I can find it, an aura with better coffee can find it." "Sit down." For the first time, Luca lost the superior arch to his mouth. He stepped back, misjudged the hawthorn, and hissed when a thorn did what thorn has done since plants invented teeth. The mirror enjoyed all of this none. "Mercy," it said again, reminding everyone. Without performance. Draco, who had watched the exchange with a stillness he had learned the hard way, moved to Montague, but did not touch him. "It's going to be loud," he said, meaning the school, the rumour, the days after. "Don't explain. Don't decorate. Say I was wrong, and sit somewhere the wind goes." Montague snorted a sound between a laugh and a broken thing. "That's your advice?" "That's my costliest trick," Draco said, and for once the words contained neither flattery nor self-harm. "Simply a ledger item." The mirror settled. Light braided and unbraided itself inside the glass like a muscle testing strength after a long hurt. Then it went still, surface flat as law. "Accepted," said the iron. "Object released." The black pane loosened from its moorings with a sound like frost lifting. Hermione flinched, expecting weight. It weighed almost nothing, like a book made of verdicts. Ketch stepped forward with the caution of a clerk receiving a dragon. Marrow's shoulders dropped the distance of one fact. "Done," Ron said, and then lower. "Careful." Because the clearing did not go back to ordinary. The hawthorn leaves at their ankles whispered to each other in wind that hadn't entered yet. The oath thread warmed, not with triumph, but with alarm. "Movement," Draco said, already pivoting. "Northeast," branches broke. Not sound, shape. A clutch of rag-wrapped figures unspooled from the tree line, eyes glazed with the dull shine of potion, one-shelled with the particular confidence of people who had practiced malice and mistakes. Renegade hangers-on of unfinished wars, Hogwarts still grew these like nettles in forgotten corners. "Down!" Ron snapped. The first spell cracked the ground where Hermione had been. The second glanced off Draco's shoulder, which would have been far worse if not for the oath's warning tug that made him turn a fraction. He grunted, breath stolen, not body. "Don't let them touch the mirror," Marrow called, voice sharp and trained. "Don't break the ring," Vector had said, earlier, to no one in particular. Hermione kept within the stones and felt the oath heat to the edge of surge, as if waiting for permission. "Small," she said to it, not aloud. "Small," the thread repeated, obedient and awake. She and Draco moved like a new kind of arithmetic. Sum, cancel, carry. His shield took the angled spells, hers stitched the gaps. Ron dropped one attacker with a non-lethal that would keep the boy's future open. Luca, for once sensible, ducked. A ragged man with a face like a knife pushed toward the mirror, eyes full of idea rather than person. Hermione's spell met his with a sound like a note found and corrected. He went to his knees, winded but not ruined. She breathed, mercy without audience. The mirror did not bite. "Behind," Draco said. She turned a hair sooner than she would have last month because the bond did not need to be big to be fast. Her shield caught the spell that would have unstitched his back. "On your left," she said. He pivoted, wand low, the elegant parry of a boy who had been taught dueling as a language and grown to hate its grammar. The air smelled of sap and old char and the acid of spent magic. Then Montague, whose fear had switched directions into something like courage, shouted, "You're right!" and pushed Draco out of a curse that hit him instead. The boy went down hard, breath leaving like a borrowed thing reluctantly returned. "Hold!" Hermione snapped to the world, to Draco, to herself. She dropped to Montague long enough to make sure the hurt was loud, temporary, survivable. He grimaced, nodded, did not reach for drama. Without thinking, Hermione put another peppermint between his fingers. He laughed a little and made it a vow to none of them to stay down. The last attacker saw he was going to lose and decided to make losing into theatre. He flung a bright, stupid thing at the mirror, perhaps guessing that shattering truth is the same as changing it. Draco intercepted, spine bent, wand up, math correct. The spell hit wood. Wood lived. The hawthorn flared with white saplight, took the force, scorched, refused to die. The mirror stood, dark, unruffled, as if reminding everyone that breaking a tool is not the same as silencing the principle it measures. And suddenly the clearing was only breathing. Bodies prone, not ruined. Ministry boots coming fast. Ron with a hand pressed to his ribs where someone had landed a clumsy triumph. Marrow already directing with the steadiness of a person who has the right kind of power. Luca trying to look helpful for a story that would be told later in committee. Hermione looked at Draco. The oath thread warmed a small, satisfied warmth that did not ask to be admired. "Unadorned," he said. "Necessary," she replied. They stood very still in the ring while the world assembled itself around their choice. Marrow arrived, eyes sharp, approval carefully under cover. "You passed," she said, and the mirror let the word sit without objecting. "All of it." Ketch cleared his throat, as if something about all of this had disturbed a line in him he had preferred tidy. "The recommendation will reflect restraint," he managed. Ron panted a quiet laugh that turned into a cough. "Restraint, the Hogwarts elective we never signed up for." Luca, pale and bristling with salvaged dignity, straightened his coat. "The board will want—" "No," Marrow said, softly enough to be kind, plainly enough to be final. "They will want less today." The hawthorn leaves finally accepted wind. The clearing exhaled. Someone from the aura detail took the mirror with two hands, the way one takes a crown one does not want to wear. They began the walk back while the forest decided not to follow. The oath thread lay small and warm at Hermione's wrist, the exact size of the choice they had made, not a charm, not a chain. At the tree line, where shadows learn how to be rooms again, Ron fell into step between them, like an old habit that had learned new manners. "So," he said, bright with the kind of joke that knows it is a bandage. "Part 3 of your dramatic romance, doing nothing fancy until it hurts." "Accurate," Draco admitted. Hermione smiled despite the day. "I would call it terms of mercy." "You would," Ron said, as if accusing her of a kindness. "We need to talk about Luca. I have proof and a plan." "Later," Marrow called, overhearing from 5 paces back. "After paperwork and tea." They reached the first lamplit arch of the castle. The stone tasted like home when the air hits it right. Students parted, whispered, looked, and this time some of them did not speak. They nodded once, curiosity folded into something quieter. The oath warmed. It had enjoyed that. Hermione glanced at Draco, and in that small, unperformed glance lay the day's ledger. The thread, the clause that had saved him, the sugar on Montague's tongue, the hawthorn refusing to die, a boy's old grammar rewritten into present tense. He looked back. "Library," he said idly, as if they were only discussing where to write the report. "Door," she answered, and the words paid the bill for the evening without demanding change. They turned toward the study corridor. Halfway there, the castle did the thing it had done the week of the hearing. It carried a rumour faster than feet. But this time the rumour was not a story. It was a summons. McGonagall stood in the doorway of her office with an owl on her wrist, and a letter so urgent it looked like a hot coal. Her expression had learned new granite. "Inside," she said. "All three of you." They went in. The owl left soot on the desk. McGonagall broke the seal. Her eyes moved like a sword opening. "The board has voted," she said. "The programme stands. Severance suspended indefinitely. But there is a condition. Silence, which is sometimes mercy and sometimes theatre. Effective immediately," McGonagall continued, voice cutting each word as if it had tried to braid itself with something less precise. "Bonded pairs who have passed field assessment will be permitted, by petition, to convert the oath from mandated reconciliation to voluntary covenant. It will no longer be the Ministry's bond. It will be yours. Accepted or declined by both signatories, chosen in full knowledge of terms." Hermione's lungs forgot and then remembered. The oath thread warmed, fear and joy mixed like light and water. "What are the terms?" Draco asked, not moving. "Explicit consent," McGonagall said. "Scope set by you. Renewal yearly. Dissolution upon mutual request or magic's death." She set the parchment down. "You have until dawn." The castle waited to see whether two people would do the simplest and scariest thing at once: choose. The oath at Hermione's wrist pulsed once, as if to say small or grow. No iron voice, no audience, just two hands and a lamp and a door. She looked at Draco. He didn't reach. Neither did she. "Library," he said. "Door," she replied. They turned down the corridor together. The portraits held their breath as if breath with a coin now. The lamp in the study room lit itself, because some promises, once made, prefer not to be dramatic. The door closed. The castle never truly slept, but there were hours when it pretended. The hour before dawn was one of them, when even the ghosts had the decency to keep quiet, and the torches burned with the hush of things thinking. Hermione and Draco walked the long corridor that led to the library, the stone beneath their shoes carrying the soft echo of decision. Neither spoke. The air between them felt taut, but not hostile, like the space between two pages before one turns. The oath thread at Hermione's wrist glowed faintly, aware that something final was approaching. It did not pull, it simply waited. They reached the library doors. She pressed her palm to the wood. "Door," she whispered, and it opened, obedient as ever. Inside, candles lit themselves, perhaps remembering what had been asked of them months ago when this began. The desks looked like they were holding their breath. Draco set his wand down on the nearest table. "No magic," he said quietly. "If it's to be ours, we write it without the oath listening first." Hermione nodded. "Agreed." They sat opposite each other, parchment between them. The ink bottle trembled when opened, as if it too understood consequence. For a moment neither moved. Then Hermione spoke, voice steady but soft. "Every spell begins with language. This, whatever it becomes, should start the same way. What do we call it?" He met her eyes. "Not forgiveness. Not punishment. Something simpler." She thought for a long moment, then said, "Covenant." The word hung in the air, calm and unpretentious. The oath thread warmed once, accepting the name like a signature. Hermione dipped her quill. "Then let's write. Article 1. Purpose. We acknowledge the oath was forged by compulsion, but we choose what remains of it freely. Its purpose shall be clarity, not confession. Connection, not control." Draco watched her handwriting, the curve of her letters. "That sounds like you." She smiled faintly. "You'd prefer something colder?" He reached for his own quill. "Something true." He added beneath her line, "We will speak honestly, even when silence would make us look better." Hermione read it once, then nodded. "That's better than most legislation." "Low bar," he said. Article 2, Boundaries. Hermione wrote carefully. "This covenant will not interfere with our separate lives, choices, or loyalties. It will not measure affection or demand it. It exists so that truth cannot be mistaken for duty." Draco leaned forward. "Add, either may dissolve it when it becomes a cage instead of a bridge." She looked up. "You really think it could become one again?" He met her gaze. Anything worth keeping could? She hesitated, then wrote it word for word. The oath thread pulsed faintly, approving the precision. Article 3, Renewal. Draco's handwriting was sharper than hers, precise, impatient. We agree to revisit this covenant yearly at dawn on the day it was first written. If both consent, it renews. If one withdraws, it ends without punishment or blame. He paused, tapping the quill against his thumb. That part's for you. Why? You like closure, he said. You don't pretend endings are failures. Hermione looked at him across the parchment. You're learning. Occupational hazard of being alive again, he murmured. Article 4, Mercy. Hermione's hand trembled only once as she wrote, Mercy will not mean forgetting. It will mean accuracy. What was done was done. What is chosen now is chosen awake. Draco added below it, we will be kind only when we mean it. We will never use kindness as a weapon or an alibi. She exhaled softly. That's a good one. Learned from experience, he said. They read the parchment in silence. There was no flourish, no spell work, only the sound of candle wax shifting. The oath thread pulsed with steady rhythm now, a heartbeat shared, not stolen. Hermione looked up. Do you want to add anything else? He considered, then wrote a single line at the bottom. We will not let the world decide the meaning of this bond before we do. Hermione felt the words like warmth in winter. She nodded. Then we sign. They each pressed their fingertips to the parchment, not their wands. Ink rose to meet skin, blooming in faint gold, the last remnant of the oath's magic. The letters shimmered once, then settled, sealed by will alone. A quiet pulse of light radiated outward, gentle as breath. The oath thread at their wrists dimmed, then reshaped, no longer a symbol of command, but a small, permanent line of light that moved with their pulse. It did not bind. It belonged. The door creaked softly. Ron leaned in, half-smile already forming. You two finished rewriting magical history, or should I start drafting the press release? Draco smirked. You're early. It's dawn, Ron said. You're late. He stepped closer, glancing at the parchment. Looks like law. Hermione handed it to him. It is just not theirs. Ron read, lips moving slightly. When he reached the end, he exhaled. It's good, he said simply. Better than most treaties I've seen in the Aura office. Draco tilted his head. High praise. Don't get used to it, Ron replied, but his tone held no edge. The Ministry will hate that they can't improve it. That's the point, Hermione said quietly. Ron nodded, then set the parchment down with exaggerated care. All right. I'll file nothing, say nothing, and pretend I was never here. Seems appropriate. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. For what it's worth, he said, looking at Hermione. I'm glad you didn't stop at survival. Then to Draco. Don't make me regret it. Draco's expression softened. Not my specialty anymore. Ron gave a small crooked grin and left, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, there was only candlelight and the faint hum of the waking castle. The first blush of dawn crept through the high windows, catching the ink on the parchment and turning it to gold. Hermione rose, walked to the window and looked out. The sky was turning pale rose, and below the lake mirrored it perfectly, two halves of light meeting in quiet agreement. Draco came to stand beside her. Do you think they'll honour it? The Ministry? She asked. No, but that's not who it's for. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. Then who? She smiled faintly. Us, the version of us that keeps trying to do better. He leaned against the window frame, watching her more than the sunrise. You know, Granger, for someone who claims to be done saving people, you've got a terrible habit of saving me. Hermione turned to him, amused. That's not mercy, Malfoy, that's consistency. Dangerous virtue, he murmured. She stepped closer. The oath thread between them glowed briefly, like a sigh. Door and lamp, she said softly, the words that had steadied them through every descent. Return, he finished. Their hands found each other naturally, not desperate, not ceremonial, but honest. The thread warmed once more, then stilled. Outside, the castle bell tolled the first hour of morning. The world beyond their window looked rinsed clean, as if even the war's old ghosts had decided to rest for a while. Draco glanced at the parchment still glowing faintly on the desk. "You realise we've just written the least romantic love story imaginable?" Hermione smiled. "You're wrong. It's the most romantic kind, two people agreeing to stay honest even when it's inconvenient." He laughed softly. "So that's what love is, then?" She looked at him, eyes bright in the dawn light. "It's what ours is," he didn't argue. Later, when McGonagall received their signed covenant, she read it once, folded it neatly and said only, "About time the Ministry learned that mercy and law are not synonyms." Vector placed it in the archives without spellwork, only careful hands and a quiet nod. And when night came again, the castle exhaled the day's noise, leaving the new covenant to settle among the Livingstons of Hogwarts, where it would hum faintly, not as a law, not as an oath, but as a small, true promise that had chosen to stay.